All right, let's take you then to a briefing. Ministers who serve in the Energy Crisis Committee are briefing the media following President Cyril Ramaphosa's address to the nation last month to further outline measures to ensure long-term energy supply in South Africa. Let's take you live there and listen in.
All 7 of the ministers from that crisis committee which the President put in place, and who are going to share with you under the leadership of the Minister and the Presidency today some more details. So please, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to hand over to Mr. MONDLI, GUNGUBELE, the Minister in the Presidency, who will do an introduction on behalf of the team, and then we will have an opportunity to field as many questions as you like, and some of the details that some of you have mentioned in your articles that you think we need a bit more detail. So, Minister of the Presidency, if I could invite you to come forward and take over, please, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karen, DDG, for this opportunity. Good, is it? What time is it now? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. Various media houses, let's thank you again. Further reinforce that from Mike for actually responding as you usually do. Before I introduce the ministers, I will first read the statement. As you all are aware, President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation on Monday, 25th July 2022, where he announced an unprecedented set of intervention to end load shedding and achieve energy security. Load shedding is the single biggest constraint on South Africa's economic growth. Government is taking bold steps both to address the immediate crisis and to make load shedding a thing of the past. Further, we are mobilizing all of the resources at our disposal and will do whatever it takes to achieve energy security. I must emphasize that achieving energy security is our single most important objective as a country to enable economic growth and job creation. Our short-term objective is to reduce the severity and frequency of load shedding through immediate measures to stabilize the energy system. Our long-term objective is to end load shedding and secure energy security and secure energy for the country. I beg your pardon. In this regard, government will focus on the following. First, improving the performance of Eskom's existing power station. Secondly, adding as much new generation capacity to the grid as possible, as quickly as possible. To this end, the President established the National Energy Crisis Committee, comprising of all relevant government departments and Eskom, led by the Director General in the Presidency, Ms. Phini Lebaleni. This structure reports to an interministerial committee which will be chaired by the President and comprises the Minister in the Presidency, the Minister of Mineral and Resources and Energy, the Minister of Public Enterprise, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and the Minister of Trade and Competition. Several options have already been taken to address the shortfall in electricity supply, which is the main cause of load shedding. Some of these actions include, first, changes have been made to regulations on new generation capacity to allow municipalities to procure power independently. As a result, several municipalities are in the process of procuring additional power. One of the first steps President Cyril Ramaphosa took was to revive the renewable energy procurement program. This enabled 2,205 megawatts from the bid window 4 to proceed to construction, the majority of which has now been connected to the grid. A further 6,800 megawatts of solar PV and wind power is being procured in terms of the current ministerial determination. This additional generation capacity will connect to the grid from late 2023, another 3,000 megawatts of gas and 513 of battery storage will be procured through the next bid windows. In 2021, we raised the licensing threshold from 1 megawatts to 100 megawatts. This has resulted in a pipeline of more than 80 confirmed private sector projects under development with a combined capacity of over 6,000 megawatts, several of which will commence construction this year. Eskom has established an independent transmission company and is on track to separate its generation and distribution businesses by the end of 2022. These are just few examples of the intervention government has already put in place. However, we recognize that we need to be responsive to the situation as it develops. The severe load shedding which we experienced last month showed that additional actions are necessary to restore system stability and increase generation capacity. Today, the ministers will be unpacking, depending on the questions that the floor raises, in more detail as we outline the next step to ensure effective implementation. The plan announced by the President includes the 5 interventions with specific actions and timeframes to address the electricity shortfall. Here are these 5 action interventions. 1, fix Eskom and improve the availability of existing supply, enable and accelerate private investment in the generation capacity, accelerate procurement of new capacity from renewables, gas and battery storage. 4, unleash businesses and households to invest in rooftop solar. 5, fundamentally transform the electricity sector to achieve long-term energy security. The Crisis Committee has already begun to meet regularly to ensure that these actions are implemented swiftly. 8 work streams have been established to ensure coordination across government, and discussions are underway with private sector and other social partners to ensure that the best available expertise in the country is brought to this effort. The safety and security work stream under the energy net joints have already made progress in tackling sabotage, theft and fraud at Eskom power station and other key installations. As the President said in his address to the nation, if I open quote, the crisis that we are facing requires that we should take bold, courageous and decisive action to close the electricity gap, close quote. This is our overriding objective as government. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go straight. This is based on the assumption that the plan has been read by you several times. The ministers are here to respond to whatever questions that emanate from you reading the plan. If I start from my right, not politically, is Minister Patel, Trade and Industry, followed by Minister CELE, South African Police Service, followed by Minister GODONGWANA, Minister of Finance, followed by Minister GORDHAN-PUBLIC Enterprise, followed by Minister MANTASHE-MINERAL, Resource and Energy, followed by Minister CREECY, Environment, Fishery and Forestry. If I left anything, you will fill in, Minister Bob. Now, colleagues, we are business in our approach. We want to spend most of the time interacting with your questions. You can shoot. If we can take the first round.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
So far, we don't have any questions.
All of you?
Or online, on WhatsApp groups.
Online, okay. Or online, there are no questions. But I suspect here there are questions. Unless the President was too clear. Yes? Looks like govern. Govern.
So much so it's governable from ENCA.
Mm.
Obviously, this is a plan for emergency procurement of additional generation capacity.
You can't hear you, govern. Speak up.
I'd like to know how much additional generation capacity would be procured in the short term to immediately address ESCOM's shortage. And from the different avenues of procurement, the private sector, fixing ESCOM, the IPPs, the rolling out of more power lines, which of these mechanisms would be utilized first or has been utilized already, and how much is it brought on in additional capacity?
Is that all, governor?
No, Minister, I've still got...
Okay,
I've still got to go through the
come.
whole plan. I have more questions.
Because you're alone, come with more of your questions if you have.
All right, thank you. The plan also suggests the extension of ESCOM power lines and seems to suggest the rolling out of the additional power lines where there is low to medium environmental sensitivity. Does that suggest then deviating from environmental impact assessment requirements? Will that be skipped? It also suggests rolling out or the enablement of IPPs construction on projects from bid window 5 and 6 urgently, taking into consideration some of the localization requirements and how that would affect the red tape. Does that mean that some of the localization requirements of those contracts would be deviated from so that they could be done quicker? And then I have more, but I just need to get this one correct.
No, you are alone. Ask the questions.
I'll just get that for now. So.
Ask the questions. You are alone. Eat. Just
I
eat,
have
go.
another one for the minister.
Because I don't see another hand.
You mentioned that significant progress has been made in dealing with sabotage, theft, and fraud of ESCOM infrastructure. Could you just highlight what you think the most significant...
Can you repeat that question, Go?
Excuse me?
Can you repeat this last question?
You've mentioned significant progress has been made in addressing the sabotage, theft, and fraud of electricity infrastructure. I'd just like to highlight what you think the biggest progress has been. Have you managed to isolate the syndicate which you believe is behind some of the sabotage or identified them? If so, who are they, please?
Is that all? We're really prepared for you guys. Okay? If it ends there,
It doesn't.
Minister, this is the first time I come in this briefing. Only one generally speak. So the first question, what's your eyesight badly?
How much additional capacity?
How much? Huh? Yes. How much energy required to ensure that in a short term we reach the effect as promised? PG?
Has this worked? Got it.
Can you hear? Are you able to hear him there?
Let's test it. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
No. All the mics are there.
Come and
the
face the
mics are
nation, please.
At the market.
No, but if it's not working, just come here.
Otherwise, we can't get it
No,
for
no,
television.
open. Just come here if it's not working. Because the nation wants to hear you. Energy in a short term and required in line with the proposed mixed and so on. Thank you. How are you?
So I said, good afternoon. And hopefully we can agitate you to ask more questions in a moment. So in terms of immediate power, the first issue is how do we get a better output from existing plant? And here, after long discussions with the ESCOM team, we've identified 6 power stations, let's call them the top 6, which are going to get a lot of attention in terms of maintenance, And by maintenance, we mean getting parts ready, getting contracts ready, having the money available, having original equipment manufacturers available if we need them. And those top 6 power stations are Kendal, Majuba, Tutuka, Kusile, Duva, and Matla. So that's the first step. The second step is the question of getting consent from my colleague next to me, Minister Mantashe, to buy what they call standard purchasing process. And here what we're talking about is current IPPs are not using necessarily all of the power that they produce, so they have surplus. So ESCOM requires consent to buy surplus power that is available in current IPPs, and up to 1,000 megawatts is potentially available in the next 3 months, and that will be connected to the grid as well. There's also potential for another 600 megawatts following a similar requirement, and this is where triple exemptions are required from Section 34, from the triple PFA and from the PFMA, and those are processes my colleagues are working on. Then there have been negotiations over the last 10 days or so with our neighboring countries in the Southern African Energy Pool, and here somewhere between 100 and 200 megawatts could be available in the period of a month, depending on the contracting mechanisms and agreement on price as well. The last area is a potential 150 megawatts from gas that could be processed in Mozambique, and that could be available in the next 3 months in the short term, but I'm sure Minister Mantashe will address the gas issue later when he has an opportunity as well. So in the immediate term, it's maintenance, it's buying excess capacity that is in the country already in the IPPs, and the potential for gas to come online as well. In terms of the ESCOM power lines, I think the intention on the ESCOM side is not to skip EIAs, but as my colleague will explain, I'm sure there are provisions which allow for fast-tracking some of these mechanisms. And one of the key elements of the new way of doing business in government, so to speak, is to remove as much red tape as possible, and a lot of intensive work has gone into this area over the last 2 or 3 weeks under the guidance and encouragement of the President himself. On the question, Minister, Police will address the sabotage, theft and fraud.
Those were your questions, President.
No, this affects this one last.
Okay, all right.
No, I want to overstep my mouth, don't worry. I don't want to become the Minister of Police. He's got his job, I've got mine. So the bottom line is that while some progress has been made in that regard around law enforcement issues, there's still a lot of fraud going on. And I think after the visit of the President to Tutuka Power Station, he actually saw for himself the areas where some of this fraud takes place, whether it's poor quality coal, the non-delivery of fuel oil, or the overcharging for parts that are required by ESCOM itself. And in those areas, there's still further work to do. Thank you.
Minister, Minister CREECY, environmental sensitivity.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Governor, there have been 2 frameworks that we have been working on for some months now. The first is an environmental screening tool, which is available to all environmental practitioners, and what it does is it identifies areas of low, medium and high sensitivity, environmental sensitivity, And the intention is to be able to use this screening tool going into the future in a range of situations so that we can streamline environmental impact assessments. Now, working together with this tool, we have also been working on a standard for the development and expansion of power lines and substations in identified geographical areas, and we are in the process of gazetting those areas at the moment. And based on compliance with the standard for the development and expansion of power lines and substations, they can be excluded from the need to obtain an environmental authorization prior to commencement, as long as they're being developed in areas of low and medium sensitivity. And of course, the obvious question that you would then pose is, how are you absolutely sure that this is an area of low or medium sensitivity? So there will be a requirement for a registration process, and that registration process will require a walkthrough by a qualified environmental practitioner of the area to confirm that it is indeed of low or medium sensitivity. And of course, what we know is that an area can generally be of low sensitivity, but there might be a wetland or an endangered vegetation, and of course that particular area would then need to be excluded from the development. In addition to that, it's also important to say that we have already identified 5 electricity transmission corridors, and it's when this particular infrastructure is located within those transmission corridors, and obviously we have worked with Eskom on identifying those corridors, that these provisions with regard to not needing an EIA would kick in if it's areas of low and medium sensitivity. Thank you very much.
Minister Patel.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Minister Gungubele. The question that was raised that I want to respond to is whether localization requirements will be deviated from. The short answer is yes. I want to provide a little bit of context and how it will work. The bid window 5 currently has a provision that requires certain components to be manufactured locally and to go into the construction of both wind and solar plants. In respect of solar plants, there has been a proposal put to government that one element of the solar plant, namely the PV, the solar PV module, should be more flexibly designated. Now, the PV module consists of the cells. They basically transform the ray of the sun into electrical energy. There's currently 2 producers of these modules in South Africa. The one is based in eThekwini, it's it's Art Solar, and the second one is based in Buffalo City, it's Seraphim. I'm advised that these 2 firms together have invested about R750 million in building local capacity for the new program that government has announced. We've taken the view in government, set out by the President in the address to the nation, that the priority is to get as much electricity, as much energy into the grid as rapidly as possible. That's fundamental. It's important for the economy, it's important for growth, it's important for industrialization and even our localization ambition across the economy. It's important for ordinary South Africans. And so therefore we've taken the conclusion to that view that the localization targets for component manufacturing, in this case the PV solar module, should not retard the speed with which the independent power producers and ESCOM can get energy onto the grid. So to ensure that local content measures complement and support the rapid rollout of new energy, we've developed a flexibility framework for bid window 5. This flexibility framework covers solar PV panels specifically, because that's the area that the market has come back to us and said they would like to get some flexibility. There are two elements to this flexibility. The first is that there is a current requirement for 100% localization of PV panels or modules. This will be reduced very drastically to 35%. And these would then be produced by these two firms that I spoke of. Secondly, within this 35% that will be produced locally, if there are any delays or any challenges with supply, there's also an exemption facility that will be put in place. This is a wide deviation, and it's put in place because we believe it's most helpful to the economy, and at the same time it's been structured to enable local production of some of the demand from local producers. For future bid windows, the localization targets are intended to be incrementally increased to allow the scaling up of local production, to create jobs, and to strengthen supply chain security. Members of the media would have seen how disruptions in global supply chains have affected the South African economy, and we want to address that by building that capacity locally. And in addition, special emphasis will be placed on location of new component production facilities closer to areas that are affected by the energy transition. So that, in broad terms, sets out the approach that we've taken, a high level of flexibility and putting the priority on the rapid generation of new energy that can come onto the grid. I hope that provides sufficient context to the approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Minister CELE. Security and sabotage.
Thanks, President, colleagues. 2 Saturdays ago, I was just wondering why I was invited in the panel or the visit that was undertaken by the President to some of these stations with the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Public Enterprise. I was really wondering until I sat down and I listened and I realized why the President has brought me in. You find that some GMs, general managers of these stations, they move around with the personal protectors. Not only them, their wives move around with the personal protectors, not their wives, their kids are taken to school by the personal protectors. That starts from inside these stations, where the criminals from both internal and external, they collude to steal the whole tank of diesel, the whole tank of oil coming to the company. And in the middle of grinding and working machines, there is no oil. Where the engineers will go to the storeroom to find a spare of a machine, and all those spares of machine appear on the paper, but nothing you find at the room where they are supposed to be, at the spare rooms, but all the money is paid for. That's what is happening. That will be internal. Therefore,
National Commissioner, who is here, has, in collaboration with the general managers of these stations, I'm not going to mention them by names, these stations, where these things are happening, has created a team. I was quite impressed when that general manager, under all those trans conditions, but still was very much expressive of police and saying they are working together. On the middle of the middle management there and people working there, between 4 and in that station, between 4 and 6 people have been arrested. We are hopeful that the whole chain of the justice system will begin to take those matters very, very serious. And indeed, there were in last financial year 210 cases that have been opened, and 191 of those people were found guilty, and some of them are doing between 10 and 15 years. So it's taken serious, especially when it comes to the copper. But maybe to demonstrate and illustrate what is happening, because it's not just on the sabotage where people they put the stones on the bottom of the truck and they put the coal on top as part of the sabotage, and all those things, they go to a machine and they begin to reduce the functionality of machine, a machine that is supposed to be taken care of in terms of service in 18 months, because it's grinding stones, it will take only 8 years. So it will take only 8 months. So, but it doesn't end there. It goes outside where is a big sabotage. People stealing the copper, stealing the lines, and all that kind of things. This has recently happened, that in Gauteng on the 16th May 2022, 5 suspects were arrested for tampering with essential infrastructure at railway line. So these are the arrests. On the 26th May 2022, 3 suspects were arrested posing as contractors, and then they get in these places as contractors, and they go there. They take the copper, they take whatever they can take as a sabotage, and going out to sell those things. On 28th May 2022, 3 suspects were arrested for possession of Eskom and City Power cables at an identified premises, and the estimated price for was 500,000 and 200,000. On 9th of June 2022, suspect was arrested stealing the copper that could amounted to 168,415. On the 7th of July, 2 suspects were arrested with the copper cable theft of 55,000. Gauteng on the 8th of July 2022, 1 suspect was arrested with a 10 million worth Telkom and Eskom copper. On the 22nd of June, suspects were arrested when suspicious vehicles stopped and undisclosed amount of steel pipes utilized within the mining industry were arrested. So we are doing all what we can and putting special teams to work on these things, as we have been instructed by the President to create special teams to deal with the sabotage on the infrastructure, the sabotage on the mines, Zamazamas working with the minister here, but also working on the stations, power stations. It's not just only administrative and technical problems that might come with the load shedding, but lot of sabotage and criminality, and we are working hard to arrest those responsible for that. Thanks. Thank you, Minister. We're getting to online now. I'm told that there are people who have developed appetite online. What is online?
Thank you, Minister. Yes, indeed, we have several questions.
Several questions online, colleagues.
I'll start with Carol Payton from News 24. Minister, we have had numerous IMCs and a war group of ministers. How will this energy crisis committee be different from those previous efforts that have achieved so little? The next question is from Comrin Amabungana Center for Investigative Journalism. While one of the plans is to improve the performance of ESCOM's fleet, but few details have been provided on the scope of this intervention. How much money will be made available for additional maintenance of the ESCOM coal fleet? And what do you expect this to achieve in terms of capacity? The next question is from Lamis Omaji, News 24. Can Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, EBRAHIM PATEL, clarify if there will be local content exemptions and what they entail? The next one, Stephen Crotes, Newsroom Africa. Can we assume that all of the ministers on this committee are completely agreed on what will happen? That it will definitely be easier to add more power to the grid and that this will happen quickly? The next question is Alex Wailing from Reuters. To the Minister of Finance, ESCOM CEO Andrew De Ruyter has talked of 200 billion rand as a more sustainable debt burden for the utility, which is half the current level. What do you see as a sustainable amount of debt on ESCOM's balance sheet? What is your preference to arrive this? The next one is a question from Carol Payton.
Do you want to repeat your question towards the Minister of Finance?
ESCOM CEO Andrew De Ruyter has talked of 200 billion rand as a more sustainable debt burden for the utility, which is half the current level. What do you see as a sustainable amount of debt on ESCOM's balance sheet? What is your preferences to arrive at this? The next question, Carol Payton, News 24. The plan says that ESCOM will be able to immediately dispatch interim power on an emergency basis for a period of 2 to 3 years, while ensuring transparency and cost effectiveness. What does this mean? Does it include power ships? And the next question is CELE Gudra Business Report newspaper. To Minister MANTASHE, your proposal for a second state-owned power utility does not seem to gain traction or enjoy support within the ruling party. How far are the moves for realizing this proposal, or has it died a natural death? The second question from CELE Gudra. To Minister GODONGWANA, has ESCOM approached the National Treasury for additional funds to finance its procurement of surplus capacity from IPPs and additional capacity from neighboring countries? If so, how much does ESCOM need for this program? The next question, Opanogumbi, Newsroom Africa. How are you going to speed up procurement? Are you going to allow ESCOM to deviate from the PFMA? Carol Payton again from News 24. What is the view in getting a power ship to supply short-term energy?
Can you repeat that one?
Carol Payton, what is the view in getting a power ship to supply short-term energy?
Okay.
The next question, the Nene Erasmus from Business Day. Can Minister MANTASHE provide an indication when the declination will be gazetted to lift the 100 megawatts licensing threshold on private generation? The next question, Anastasia Mukubu from Jacaranda FM News. Is there perhaps an update yet on the actions to be taken regarding ESCOM's debt? Also, have policing resources been deployed yet to ESCOM and specifically power stations to address the issue of sabotage? Finally, can you please updated us on update. I think you wanted to say update. Can you please update us on progress with negotiations with neighboring countries to purchase additional capacity? Carol Payton again from News 24. To Minister GODONGWANA, will you be increasing ESCOM's drawdown from the budget, given the promise to ESCOM to fund more maintenance? And how much will that be? The next set of questions, they are from Terence Klima, Engineering News. The first one, when will a ministerial determination be published to cater for all the remaining capacity available under IRP 2019? Can the IPP office accommodate the increase in bid window 6 to 5,200 megawatts within the same bid submission time frame? In which days? The third question, what adjustments will be made to ensure bid window 5 project reach financial closure in July and September? The last question from Terence Klima. When will the storage peaking power RFPs be published? The next questions, they are from Carl Cohen, News 24. Why has it taken so long for the departments you all collectively lead to recognize not only the national crisis around energy, but to take the lead with tangible interventions to address the various problems with speed appropriately? Minister Gordhan, do you agree that outdated ANC policy on energy and the way it is managed and procured, as well as the party's involvement in corruption in the energy space, is partly to blame for the escalation of the crisis since 2007? When will the board of the National Transmission Company of SA be announced? Is the process being held up at the ANC Development Committee?
The board of?
When will the board of the National Transmission Company of South Africa be announced? Is the process being held up at the ANC Development Committee? Are there enough people available to take on these roles? The next question is Paul Pechiato, Bloomberg. The President indicated that the IRP will be received and will be reviewed and updated. When will this happen and when will it be released? The last question is Vikas Breaker in Network 24. Minister MANTASHE, what time frame are we looking at before you make a Section 34 determination in terms of the Electricity Regulation Act to enable the purchase of additional power from the existing IPPs? That's all for now, Minister.
Yeah. Made a mistake by challenging you, huh? Now we've got a lot of work to do. No, wait a bit. What I'm going to propose to ministers, all of you have questions. I'll propose each minister to deal with all the questions that are related to you. But if the question that is related to you has already been answered, you don't have to come and repeat it here. I'll start with Minister CREECY. So there's nothing for you, right? Mr. Patel? There's localization. Oh, it was answered that question, you're right. Minister Ndosi, you have spoken on security. Then it's only 3. Minister, all the billions, did ESCOM apply for money? And how long will procurement be responsive? And all those issues. You will also deal with all the red tape issues.
Thank you. I was worried when I was not getting questions. Something that is common in Imbizos, when we go to President make Imbizos, all ministers get questions. I'm the only one who doesn't get them. I think the first issue we need to deal with is the deviation from the PFF-MA. I think one of the things we've said, and the President has said, part of this package will require to deal with red tape. Red tape includes regulatory issues. Let me just give you an example. One of the things we found out, if you have got the 100 megawatts, people want to, Minister Mantashe raises to 100 megawatts. You may raise it to 1,000 if you want. But if the regulatory framework is not sorted out, Minister CREECY was referring to the environmental part, which she's handling, that it should be quick. There's a whole range of other processes. People have got to apply to NERSA, have got to apply for certain letters, types of application to ESCOM. So all of that regulatory thing has got to be managed. So that's part of the deal. The PFMA issues are part of that. In other words, if there's any regulatory issues such as deviation from the PFMA, to the extent that they have got to be done in order to make sure that the delivery of service is achieved, that will be done. So I wanted to start with that issue. The second issue, which may not have been raised, which I need to touch on, we need to, amongst ourselves, to sort the cost reflective tariff debate between ESCOM and NERSA. I'm not familiar with the problems, but the sooner that matter is attended, the better for ESCOM's sustainability. The third issue is cost of maintenance by ESCOM. ESCOM has not come to us for now for the cost of maintenance, and therefore there will be no need to talk about a drawdown. There will be no need about how much that will be, how much has been requested. What we do know, the matter was raised, a figure of about 2 billion in the context was raised. On closer interaction with ESCOM, ESCOM said no, it's too early to do that, precisely because they've given the generation division 8 billion rand for maintenance. So that's what the response they've given to us. But if the need arises, we will respond to that. The big and the last question is the big check. Is a big check, depending on which time of the ESCOM debt fluctuates between 390 to 400 billion rand. There's an accepted issue, even in the marketplace, that debt for ESCOM is unsustainable. Is unsustainable. And therefore, if it is unsustainable, it poses a risk to the sovereign. Poses a risk to the sovereign. To avoid that sovereign risk, the sovereign have got to step in. That principle is kind of agreed. We'll be going to the Cabinet Lekgotla in the first week of September with a proposal to deal with that issue. What has not been settled at the moment is the quantum of that, how much will be taken by the sovereign. But the principle is there. At the moment, both Treasury officials and ESCOM officials are developing scenarios which will table before Cabinet. So ESCOM debt is an issue which is, the principle is settled, which we are taking to the government, Lekgotla and Cabinet in due course. Look at those scenarios. The final quantum and the scenarios, and the conditions precedent, that people in the financial space call the CPs. The conditions precedent and conditions post the transaction will also be dealt with on the 26th of October in the midterm budget policy statement. I think I've covered my story.
Yeah. Thank you, Minister GODONGWANA. I think Carol PATEL.
All right, that's the 7 ministers who have made up of GODONGWANA, GUNGUBELE, GORDHAN, MANTASHE, PATEL, CELE and CREECY, who are giving an update and answering questions, of course, on an action plan to achieve long-term energy supply, and talking about the changes to be made to regulations of procuring power, and adding that the urgency is indeed to reduce the severity and frequency of load shedding.